All right, welcome back to AM Live. And this morning, this is what we're discussing: false prophets or inherited failure, the political cost of the quote Jubilee scapegoat. With me in studio, we have Suleiman Bashir, advocate and governance analyst. We've also been joined by Advice Mundalo, but in short order, Youth Chair, Jubilee Party, Kidi Mwaga, convener, Inter-Parties Youth Forum. Kidi has reminded me that he's published every Monday in the Standard his column on page 12. Let me just quickly flip through here. I see, let us shed our dependence on imports, reinvest in production. Tafungulia hapa in a moment. Okay, so, but I did promise I would open the revised charges, intended charges, from the Ministry of Interior's Twitter. Here we go. And so essentially in the first paragraph here, he tells us the initial Gazette notice was revoked. In lieu of that, they have now published the intended charges, fees and levies for the same services to take effect on January the 1st, 2024. And the explanation given by the Interior Cabinet Secretary was that the intended revised charges, fees and levies are informed by the need for Kenya's self-reliance in financing the national budget to wean the country from unsustainable debt that poses grave threats to our sovereignty and the dignity of future generations. The new intended charges, fees and levies have been adjusted to accommodate views of the public already received following the publication of the revoked Gazette notices. On the particular issue of acquisition of national ID by previously not registered citizens, the government shall defray the costs of the revised charges, fees and levies through a waiver for indigent Kenyans who demonstrate inability to pay. So initially it was to cost 1,000 bob. Okay, this is not very visible. Should be the next one. Let me just pull that up. So that is page 1. Should be page. Let's see if it's here. Okay. No, let's see the next one. Almost there. Patience pays, no? Yep, here we go. So initially it was for not previously registered persons. It was 1,000 bob. It was raised from 0 to 1,000 bob, and then to replace, initially it was 2,000 bob, but revised downwards to 1,000 bob. But Advice Mundalo, I had sought your fellow panelists' views on this headline after record taxes, state eyes, fees, fines. President William Ruto's administration has now turned its focus on fees and fines paid to state agencies for various services as the government targets an additional 112 billion shillings in non-tax revenue to supplement tax revenues in the current financial year. And the government expects the various state departments to collect a record 431.2 billion shillings in appropriation in aid or fees, fines and levies this year, explaining the desperate adjustments on charges for various services offered by the state. Yesterday, now that we're talking about what former President Uhuru Kenyatta had to say, he was like, listen to Kenyans, hear them out, and also he said, muwabembeleze msiwaongeleshe na hasira. Yeah. That. Your thoughts on this in view of that?
Okay. First of all, good morning, Olive, and good morning to the rest of Kenyans. It's great to be on this NTV panel once again. My thoughts on this, I would basically say that there has been something we've kept saying, that you cannot tax the country and the people to the independence of the state. I still think that is true. Because in as much as we really want to pay our debts, in as much as we want to get ourselves to a place where we have the independence in terms of our economy, we literally cannot make the people the subject of everything. Because at the end of the day, government must remember that all this is about the people of the Republic of Kenya. So in a situation where the economy is as hard as it is right now, when the situation of things is as hard as it already is, I don't think it's a very good idea to worsen it for the Kenyans, because sometimes you get to a point where the common mwananchi gets too choked, especially when you start touching on things that really people deal with every day, like the IDs and such kind of things. Because when you go to the Huduma centers every day, those are the things you'll be finding the common mwananchi dealing with. So when that starts becoming expensive for the citizen, it starts, in my view, not being a very good thing. It does not appear like government is very kind to its own people. So in as much as we need the money, in as much as we want to really get ourselves to a place of independence in terms of how we run our economy, but making the people the direct target through the fines and whatsoever, I don't think it's really the best strategy. I would really applaud. Remember when the first Gazette notice came out, the figures were outrageous. They were, in my view, out of the ordinary, because when you start telling people that they will be spending 2,000 shillings to replace their IDs, when we have people in Kenya who earn 2,000 shillings per month, then basically you're trying to say that some people will be working to replace their IDs. So, but... there
are people who earn 2,000 shillings per month?
Yes.
How does that work out?
Yes, we have people who earn 2,000 shillings and even less per month. When you go to the rural areas of this country, we have people who are herdsmen who take care of cattle. I'm sure rich people like Kidi who have a few cattle here and there, they would be able to know how these people earn. So we have people who actually earn as low as that, and some even lower than that already. So that just shows you how that figure is quite outrageous. It's quite on the high. So I found it quite responsive when the CS Kindiki quickly was able to, I think there was some Kamkunji or some meeting that was able to, again, I think in a record 24 hours, we saw the degazettement of these and the gazettement of other figures. To me, that was quite responsive, because, again, government is supposed to listen to the people. Maybe the figures even now are not as low as I would have wished them to be, but what I applaud is the fact that they were able to at least listen to the cry of Kenyans in those 24 hours and be able to make that adjustment.
All right. Suleiman, are we dealing with a responsive administration? Are they listening to Kenyans? Because Kindiki says already the response to the initial Gazette notice, although I will state for the record, that they listened to Kenyans and therefore responded. Or was it strategic? Did they leak it, right, to cause all of this furore and then pull it back, increase Bado, but not as by much, but not by as much as the initial Gazette notice, and therefore still achieve their objective? Because if we are to look again at the housing levy, there was a lot of furore, and then kidogo kidogo bunge wakapunguza from 3% to 1.5%. Bado waliongeza, but watu wakatulia. Was that the objective anyway, to get it to that 1.5%, but you chocha and then... Is it a strategy in your view?
I don't think we have a government that has actually been reasonable with the people of Kenya at any one time. When you see that they have actually reduced the figures a bit, I think it's because of the uproar and even the challenges that were made in court. Still, when you look at replacement of a lost passport, how do you charge the people 20,000 from 12,000? What is the justification behind this? Away from this, when we're actually applying for a new passport, I think we pay about 6,000 or so plus, depending on the number of pages we go for. Is it that they think that the people can easily afford this? I don't think so. Actually, my colleague had said that there are people who don't even make, who make about 2,000. But I'll even tell you that those who don't even make anything. There are people who finish the entire month without even making a single coin within their pockets. Which is why I'm saying issues to do with identification documents, passports, land searches. These are basics. These are things that people need to be given for free. We have been charged a lot. There's a lot we are paying for. If we are to be charged, let's say for replacement of an identification document, let it be something like 50 shillings or even 100 shillings or even 200 shillings. But when you do not consult the people, when you just throw in something, and I think the so-called public opinion that they're talking about, is it something that they have actually measured by way of Twitter responses or social media reactions? We have not seen barazas being held. We have not seen the parliament maybe inviting the people for some view taking. Whose opinions actually mattered? That is the big question. If they consider the reactions of the people on social media, These are people who can even afford smartphones and data bundles. The common mwananchi who lives within the rural sectors may not even own a smartphone. Has his or her own opinion or view been captured before even retrying this particular gesture? But I'll tell you this, we do not have a broke government. We have a very unreasonable government and a government that is yet to carbon wastage. That is my only issue with this state.
Oh, so you don't think we're broke?
I don't think so. Let me tell you something. Yesterday, I think our president has jetted out of the country. Is it for the 41st or 42nd
Germany and France
trip? I'll tell you.
It's number 40.
41st or 42nd thereabout. He was on 39th, then 40th Saudi Arabia. I think now it's 41st, 42nd thereabout. You see, according to the Auditor General's report, between last year, October and December, our president is said to have spent between 46.08 million on such a travel. Is that even reasonable? Is that even financially prudent? That is the big question. When you look at President Uhuru, who we are even blaming for the past 10 years, when you look at his entire 10-year term, he has traveled for 53. I think he has made international travels of about 53. Our president, about 14 months down the line, is on the 41st trip.
Well, I'll need to verify those figures.
Give him 5 years. I'll tell you, he might be on the 600th or the 500th trip. But I'm saying this, I do not want to look into so much about the importance or the reasonability of those particular trips. Whether or not they are making sense to us or whether they're important to us is something we are going to evaluate with time. But what I'm saying is, look at the Auditor General's report 2021-2022. There was a lot of wastage within the office of the ODPP. There was a lot of wastage at the county's level. Nairobi County is said to have wasted about 230 plus millions on travels, also both locally and foreign. You see, all these are wastages. In October 2nd this year, the government had actually issued a circular by the Chief of Staff. He tried to control the state officers in terms of, and the public servant in terms of the number of international travels they're making. That's a very important circular. But the big question is, has it been implemented? During President Uhuru's time, such a circular was also issued by the then Chief of Staff. That was never implemented, or that was never followed, which is why I'm saying a lot of wastages is what we are witnessing so many times. What we need to do is let us carbon these particular excesses that we do not need. Let us withdraw these particular unnecessary troubles that we are witnessing. I think there was an expose about Nairobi County government about the number of county executive committee members and the kind of troubles they're making, which is why I'm saying, as a people, let us invest on what is important for us. If we save a lot, that particular lot that we are saving may be actually so important to us in terms of assisting the people, in terms of in terms of how we are going to survive as a people. But when you now come back to the people, tell them we are broke, we need more money. Yet you had spent about 46.08 within a few months. Are you even being reasonable to your own people, who you are leading? Anyway, in all essence, this is something that, according to me, I still find to be very unreasonable figures. These are basics. Land search is important. Identification document is important. A permit is important. These are things that go to the core of how we live in this country as a people. These services should be as low as possible, maybe even 50 shillings or even 100 shillings.
I hear you.
Or free.
Or free. Ideally, right? Ideally. But Kidimwaga, Suleiman has said a lot. In fact, I was afraid advice ataanza ku protest. Advice, to be honest, when you were speaking, I had to check my temperature to confirm I'm not running a fever. Because you said, actually, you agreed with Suleiman and Kidimwaga on the cost of these services, increasing them may not be the best strategy. So.
Why the shock? So,
Kidimwaga, are we, the same question essentially I asked Suleiman, is this a responsive administration or are they playing us? You know, they release something, they leak something, it causes a furore, right? Then they withdraw, they release something else, still they achieve their objective, but because the figures are not as outlandish, Kenyans wanatulia. Is it a strategy?
I do not know what the strategy of the government is, but one thing I have come around to appreciate is that we have always said that people campaign in poetry but govern in prose. But more often than not, we have not taken time to interrogate how prose works. You know, pros like making sausage. Sausage is very tasty, but remember that the process of making it has got some practical and pleasant bits that you have to grapple with. I think the government finding itself in the position it finds itself in, it therefore has to raise revenue, to do a lot, the raft of issues that it has got to do. And with a very small fiscal headroom, and a less than very attractive capacity to borrow more, and even if they borrow very expensively, they have to turn back to their traditional source of revenue. Remember that the only source of revenue for the government, ideally, is the taxes. Wakili was saying that we need to be exporting. We don't have anything to export at the moment. So we have to first develop that capacity. So at the moment, I think the government finds itself in this space of having to, raise taxes as much as they have raised already, just to try to make sure that the government is a going concern. So I think it is the reality of the moment, the practicality of the moment, and I would call it is the pros of government.
All right, advice, the floor is now yours. Speaking of rethinking strategy, right? This really made the rounds on social media, this story of the Malawi president suspending foreign travel for himself and cabinet members. President Lazarus Chakwera announced austerity measures aimed at healing the economy. He's a man of God, this guy, right? I've seen him attend several church functions in Kenya. So he suspended all foreign trips by government officials.
I think that was Edgar Lungu, the former president. Who? Lungu was the man of God.
He even Chakwera? Yeah, Chakwera, yes.
Okay.
As well. The move, announced in a nationally televised address on Wednesday night, was part of what he called tough measures to heal the Southern African nation's economy. He's quoted as saying, any travel deemed absolutely necessary by anyone during that period must be submitted to my office for personal authorization. So this will be in place until March next year. So he unveiled a range of austerity measures, including cutting by 50% fuel entitlements for cabinet ministers and senior government officials. He had faced criticism over his frequent foreign travel, local media reported. So in your view, advice, Mundalo, is that the way to go?
I think first of all, we have to sometimes accept it that when government listens to the people, we cannot be able to be a republic where when government does something outrageous, we want to lash it out. When it listens and does something else, we say it's a strategy. Because now government has listened and reduced the rates, but now we want to call it a government strategy. I
asked a question. I didn't say it.
For once, we can accept that government has just been responsive and listened to the needs of the people. And then now, if I come now to the question of traveling. In the Jubilee administration, first term, the same headlines ran of President Uhuru Kenyatta, that he was traveling too much. I'm shocked that today he's an example of a person who traveled very well. What I mean to say is this, that every time a government will be set up, the president will be the #1 ambassador of that government. The president, in being the #1 envoy and ambassador of that country, of that government, cannot do that while seated on Moi Avenue. At some point, the president will have...
Harambee House.
Will have... He can choose whichever avenue. Because what we simply mean is that we don't want the president to move anywhere. So in my view, the president is our #1 diplomat. He is the #1 ambassador of the country. So he must be able to travel. When government is being set up, structures must be put in place. And therefore, the president must be able to establish relations with other governments. Otherwise, if the world is a global village and want our president to just sit in our country, we will be far from the rest of the world. So I don't see why we want to keep pushing the traveling of the president as the main reason why the country is having a problem. I think that is not the main reason. Plus, as outrageous as the figures may sound, is because we look at the president as a person. We don't want to look at the president as the presidency. Because the president does not just travel, he doesn't just take an Uber from State House and leave. the presidency is an institution, and there are many things that the president goes there to do. So they will obviously have an expenditure of some sort. And when you're able to even tabulate that into the percentage of the economy, you'll realize that it's very minimal. It's only that when you say it as one figure without comparison, with no comparison to any other, it will definitely look outrageous. Even if you take the salary of one person, Olive at NTV, and tell the rest of Kenyans, they might be very shocked and feel like that person is actually taking the entire economy of NTV. It's because it's not in comparison with every other thing. So in my view, first of all, traveling of the president is not a problem, because the president is our #1 diplomat and ambassador, so he must be able to travel. So when we come to now the issue of, and that speaks for most of the other civil servants, we have some trips that are unnecessary, and I agree. But we cannot be able to demonize all trips to be unnecessary. For instance, we have people in the engineering sector in this country. If we don't want them to travel and get in touch and in tandem with what is happening in the rest of the world, then our engineering, our infrastructure will just remain to our local levels. So people must be able to travel, because this traveling is for exposure, it's for so many other things. It's for the education, it's for many other things. But that does not underscore the reality that we also have trips that are unnecessary. For instance, when you're a cabinet secretary and you want to travel with a girlfriend, Now that starts being a necessary expenditure, but that does not underscore the entire essence why people really need to travel. So I think that would be my view on aspect of travel. Yes, austerity measures, it's important. It's important for us to cut down on our costs. It's important for us to spend on the right things. But just because we want to spend on the right thing and just because we want to save, it does not mean we are supposed to wholesomely castigate every other element, because I've seen people saying trainings are, for instance, not necessary. People should not go for benchmarking. People should not do all these things. Then if we really want to do all that, we will remain an island. We will just remain with officers who are just in this country and with no experience of what is happening the other side. So we cannot be able, they cannot be able to lead us to moving towards the century.
But are those trips really about benchmarking or about per diem? But before we get into that,
that's why I say per diem, first of all, is not a problem. Per diem is not a wrong thing, because sometimes we have created a culture where we want to castigate everything that a civil servant is entitled to. People in private sector, Olive, even when camera people at NTV leave to go to Bungoma, they have per diem because they must sleep somewhere.
But we're not earning 200,000 per day.
But some of you are earning 2 million per month. We have journalists in this country who are earning more than the president. And that is a reality. So let us not be able to criminalize the entitlements
of other people's pay slips. The
entitlements of people,
Suleiman,
of civil servants.
What do you make about what advice is saying? That Kenyans who are causing this hula baloo over the trips, foreign trips, and I don't know that to hide behind this camera, lest advice, it seems my fever has broken, lest advice throw rocks at me. But now that we're speaking of Uhuru Kenyatta, I remembered the Tanga remarks, only now it's happening across borders. But Suleiman Bashir, what do you make of what advice is saying? He's saying we are being unreasonable, that by holding up Uhuru Kenyatta now as the paragon of how you are to make foreign trips, and causing, I mean, and talking about as part of the austerity conversation, because also what has been addressed by Chakwera, according to that report I just read, is even fuel cost, right? So do you think part of the problem is that Kenyans are looking at these fuel guzzlers? I remember when was it? Madaraka Day, when the Chief Justice arrived in, was it a beast? The other day I was at Parliament when the President was giving his State of the Nation address, and when you should have seen how the CSs came, all of us were like, Allah, who are those? Perception. Do you think perception is part of the problem that Kenyans are feeling? Munatufinyilia, lakini nyinyi mko sawa tu. It is business as usual, yet you're telling us we are broke.
You see, Olive, there's a common fact which we have, that the Uhuru's government for the past 10 years was a mess. That one is not in question. That was actually one of the worst governments this country has ever had.
Yes.
We're in a scenario whereby we have now a government that is imagined as worse than Uhuru's government. You know, it's a bit strange. That used to be the worst government in the history of our country. We have a government that's now 14 months in office. But now when you look at it, on the face of it, you will be surprised at how it is running the affairs of the government. Which is why, you know, when we come out to call out on the mistakes of this government, we believe that the government has 3 years and 10 months roughly to come. It has the time to correct its mistakes. When we call out on the president to ask him to maybe cut on these particular wasteful spendings or unnecessary costs or fight corruption, it means we are trying to call out on the government to ask the government, look, you have the time. Put your house in order. Deliver to the people of this country. It is not in bad faith, and we are not doing that in bad light. All the same, let me say this. When we are giving examples of the kind of wasteful spendings and unnecessary expenditures that we have in our country, every single year, one of the very crucial institutions that is working so well in our country is the Office of the Auditor General. Go through the 2021-2022 Auditor General's report. Also look at the 2020-2021. That particular report had been subjected or has been forwarded to Parliament for Parliament to discuss and make the necessary recommendations. From the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Office of the Attorney General, Kenya Ports Authority, Nairobi City County, Garissa County, almost all the counties out of the 47 counties, there has been a lot of wasteful spendings and expenditure that cannot be accounted for. The reason as to why these particular audit reports are being forwarded to Parliament is to ask Parliament, look, can you act on this or undertake or cast your particular power of oversight on these particular institutions so that this particular mistake should not be repetitive or should not be repeated as we go forward. Those particular reports are being stashed in the trays of the House. No action is being undertaken. We always hear of the media maybe looking at it holistically, trying to paint a picture of what and the good job the Auditor General is doing in terms of the reports they are formulating. The Auditor General cannot wake up and ask you or take you to court. It is for certain institutions to undertake their mandate. That is what we are lacking. We were giving examples of the unnecessary or wasteful spendings that we have in our country. I'll just give you a practical example. On Thursday last week, there's a particular case that I'm involved in against the state. We know that courts of law at the moment are proceeding virtually. That particular court is outside Nairobi. Now, when we joined the virtual session, what I could see were advocates or counsels from the Office of the Attorney General who were physically present in court. You know, they traveled all the way, I think, to make or to take advantage of some per diems. Which is why I'm saying this is a reality. You know, we live in this country. Tunaona what is happening. Tukianza kusema ati the president is traveling, he's marketing us. Nobody is disputing that. All we are saying is, let us have a look at these particular troubles. If there is one that is so central to maybe improving our economy or that is so important to our president or our country, it is good. Kenya is a tourist destination, and always marketing it is important, and it goes to the hearts of the people. But all we are saying is unnecessary expenditure, wasteful spending and corruption should be the core issues that we need to focus on. If we focus on that and also actioning on the Auditor General's report periodically, we'll be proceeding in a way that we may not even need to come back to the people to ask for their pockets in terms of more taxes. Here on the front page of the Nation, there is a costing on late registration of death certificate from 150 to 500 shillings. Surely. These are crucial documents that you and I need in the event we do not find an opportunity here. If I want to apply for passport, it's some of the things that I need to submit in terms of registration of death certificates or birth certificates. If I need to even export my own talent, that is what the president has actually alluded to yesterday. He said, yes, we're going to export a lot of talents. It is a good thing because it will amount to revenue in terms of the people when they go outside the country. They'll be sending money back to our country for their relatives and also for investments. That's a crucial thing. But now when you make it expensive, these are youths who have just graduated. They're not even making much. So which is why I'm saying, this even reorganization or the revised charges, whose views were really listened to? Is it the views on social media, or is it the views of that particular young man who is now in Kisii after finishing university, who has not had an opportunity to maybe own a smartphone? Okay. So all the same, nobody is castigating the government in a very bad light or negatively as such. But we just want the best for our government, and where it goes wrong, I think we have the mandate and the right to ask the state on the rightful things. And and let me finish by saying this, Olive, that I had an opportunity of working in the 10th Parliament as an employee. There's a lot of powers that comes with being a member of that house. Even little things that you see that are passed by a certain institution or ministry or even parastatal, a member of that particular house can pose a question, invite that particular party or person who holds that particular crucial position, appear before a committee, pose the necessary questions, seek for clarifications. I think that is also the rightful way of holding our government officers accountable.
All right. Kidogo naogopa sana advice Mundalo vile namsoma ataanza maandamano. But speaking of foreign trips, Isaac Maura. So I was flipping to the Star. He has penned a commentary on the president's foreign trips. Government takes note of the skyrocketing cost of living, which we never shy to attribute to the omissions and commissions of the previous government. We are committed to addressing the issue. And recently there have been arguments about the president's travels abroad. The 39 foreign trips so far have been beneficial to the country, and this is in sync with Kenya's foreign policy, vision, and mission as stated in the Kenya Foreign Service Act. So this would be 40 then, right, according to this. So he says the same thing the president himself said, and advice has told us that the president is the nation's chief ambassador and CEO. Let me see. Several high-value bilateral and multilateral agreements have been signed. An ocean with opportunities and investment collaboration secured. The recent trip to Riyadh unlocked 350,000 job opportunities for Kenyans to work in Saudi Arabia. This will expand our Kenyan workforce in Saudi Arabia to over 500,000 and earns us more foreign exchange. Currently, diaspora remittances are the leading foreign exchange earner to the tune of more than 400 billion. In terms of injection to our economy, the president has inked deals worth more than 2 trillion in the long run. For example, in December last year, he secured 50 billion shillings towards the PEPFAR Health Project, 55 billion shillings funding for green mobility in Nairobi BRT3, for Nairobi BRT3, 12 billion shillings EU grant for green investments, over 130 billion shillings from development finance corporations to finance health, MSMEs and agribusiness, among other multi-billion shillings investments in the country. Notably, PepsiCo, a global leading beverage company, has chosen Nairobi to be its African hub in its efforts to tap the African market. America's NBA will also set up offices in Nairobi to help the development of the sport in the country. And further, a former authority as a diplomatic powerhouse, Nairobi is set to host the UN Office for Project Services, aside from UNEP and UN Habitat, which we currently host. This will translate to many jobs and business opportunities worth billions of shillings for Kenyans through the various projects that the UN will be implementing. President Ruto's leadership transcends our boundaries. He is a recognized global leader, and he chairs the Committee of African Heads of States and Government on Climate Crisis. Africa loses blah, blah. This has to do with climate change. Okay, so, Kitty, do you think the tide is turning? People, because the president has spoken up on the foreign trips and the perception and seeking to make the case that this is actually beneficial to the country. In your view, is he making headway? Are Kenyans beginning to appreciate?
I think that where the president, because of the work that is being done and how is containing the perception of Kenya abroad, I think the president is making headway in this sense. That most of the...
perceptions of Kenyans, where his foreign trips are concerned, not necessarily the global sphere.
No, at the moment, we must appreciate that a lot of Kenyans feel that they're being knocked out. Being knocked out because the taxes are, of course, causing a lot of anxiety. So that every time Kenyans go look at their payslip, they realize that there is a new levy that has been added to it, and that they will now be earning less. That is, of course, causing a lot of anxiety. And remember that the general cost of living is also through the roof. So that, of course, at the moment, we must say the truth that it is causing a lot of anxiety. What is important is that in the fullness of time, the president and the government are able to address the cost of living, then when that cost of living is addressed, then we also have a chance to give relief to the Kenyan pay slip, and then I think now that will begin to make sense. At the moment, we must appreciate that government has to make certain difficult decisions, and those difficult decisions are going to be very painful. And in their pain, we hope that the government is able to deal with that phase very quickly, and then Kenyans are able to begin to see the work that their government has done for them. Thank you.
All right. So we need to take a break, but we'll come back with you, Advice Mundalo. And apart from the perceptions, public perception on the foreign trips, corruption, is it, what is that thing called? Leadstone. Is that what it's called? Leadstone? Like, is it pulling down this administration, the question of corruption? There was an editorial cartoon yesterday on the Standard. Nikiwekelea Biblia tu chini ni mimi na wao. That is the cartels. And then here we have a fat cat, graft ink. And then we have, let me see if I can make this oil saga, make this out. Oil saga, fertilizer, scam, edible oil, Kemsa tender. There's one I can't quite make out there, but let me see if I will be able to. Poisonous sugar. Okay, so Advice Mundalo, we'll come back with this question on the other side of this break.
On my dark marks, I've tried everything from A to Z, even vitamin C, but hardly any results. Nivea Lumina 630 works from day one, with visible results in just 2 weeks and 71% dark marks reduction in 12. Join the 1 million women already using the #1 Lumina 630 from Nivea.
When you're finally released from pain. That moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
Hii Krisi, GoTV Stream iko mkononi. Mechi yako na sports action yote na watoije hata wao hawajawachwa nyuma. Wacha enjoyment izidi hii holiday na GoTV. GoTV Stream available from 1st December for all active customers.
At Stanbic Kenya, we believe in your financial potential, and we are here to help you reach new heights. Enjoy an attractive interest rate of up to 14% per annum on your savings. Make the most of this exclusive offer today and let your money thrive. For more details, call us today or visit a branch near you. Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back to AM Live, and what we are interrogating is this: false prophets or inherited failure, the political cost of the Jubilee, quote, scapegoat. Advice Mundalo, when I started the show this morning, you're probably on your way here, so you didn't hear me. I was saying essentially Uhuru Kenyatta has told this administration what Will Smith told Chris Rock on the Oscar stage: keep my administration's name out of your mouth. But can he now claim innocence? Is the question. False prophets, that is the Kenya Kwanza administration, or inherited failure? So is part of the problem, and we'll come back to corruption, guys. We will come back to the question of corruption. But is part of the problem the promises that Kenya Kwanza made on assuming office, on the campaign trail, and on assuming office? Because you saw the editorial cartoon on the Standard. this one of nikiweka Biblia tu chini. You know, did they overpromise? You remember there was a time Sapit, Jackson Ole Sapit was like, by the way, si kama haiwezekani mutuambie mapema. And even when you listen to these Bruno Mars, do you know the song? I'll catch a grenade for you. Is it something like that where kama vile kwa mambo ya mapenzi huwa tunaambiwa?
I think one of the problems I've done today is to sit this side where the person who sits this side mostly quotes songs. So you are being tempted to think that I'm the guy. But now on the subject, first of all, I want to say that I don't see it making a lot of sense for you to quote Uhuru Kenyatta as a good example of travel, then proceed to say he's the worst president that this country has ever had. I think that would be speaking from both ends of the mouth, because I don't really believe that President Uhuru Kenyatta was the worst president we had, because there are several things that we can actually attribute to President Uhuru Kenyatta, including a smooth transition from himself to a person that he did not support without causing any chaos in the country. I think that we can really attribute to him. We can attribute judicial independence to him, that he even lost the BBI process when he was president, and he did not interfere with it. So saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta was the worst is quite on the extreme. But what I've come to learn is that the worst government is always the one that is in the office. Because today, now you're being told President Ruto's administration is now the worst. When it was Uhuru, it was the worst. Even when it was Kibaki, remember, people have always said the Kibaki administration was the best, but they say it after the administration. So it looks like the worst administration is always the one in the office, and the best is always the previous. So, but be that as it may, when we come now to the question of the blame game of the previous administration, I really do not agree with that element, or I don't know that it's a political strategy by the current administration, that every other time when things come to a place where you need real answers, you're able to blame the previous administration. The reason we have elections is because after 5 years, there is a scorecard that the Kenyans are presented with, and then all of us go out there and present a manifesto to them and tell them that when you give us the instruments of power, we will deliver these. So you cannot get to the office and start telling them that the reason I'm not delivering is because of the previous. Because the answer should be, it's because we said we do not want the previous, that's why we gave you the opportunity. So please deliver for us without blaming the previous. So I do not agree with that element of every other time a cabinet minister, and I would excuse it in the first 2-3 months, but over a year down the line, I think that is now, it is spent cartridge. They should be able to just focus on the delivery and focus on what did you promise Kenyans. I agree, and I've always said that the biggest problem that the Kenya Kwanza administration has is that it came into office on the backs of the so-called hustlers. And so there is an expectation that is beyond normal that the hustlers head of this administration. And that's why, as a person, I sit back and I feel there are several things that they have been able to do. But the biggest problem they have is that the promise that was given to the hustlers is too big, that sometimes this hustler, what he's expecting is beyond measure. Because, for instance, you say during the campaign period, this administration, when it was now there's the Kenya Kwanza, the political outfit, they said the price of unga will come down to 100. And that was one of the elements that really brought them to office, because that was the conversation around the country. And that's why today, even when you provide hustler fund, even when you provide money to the judiciary, even when you provide autonomy to the police, the hustler is still asking you what happened to the price of unga that was supposed to come down to 100 shillings. So when you come into office on the backs of the hustlers, you must also be ready that the expectations will be enormous. And the time comes when now you have to now end the politicking and start the governing. Part of governing is in accepting that, you see what, there are some of the promises that we made that might not necessarily take as little time as we promised. They might need to take a bit of time, instead of continuing with now spiraling the same thing you told them, because now with time, it's just annoying them. So I agree that the promises that were made to the people were quite out of the ordinary. Not to mean they are not achievable, but to mean that some of them are not achievable within 1 year, practically speaking, in running of a government. So what government needs to do is also to come down to the people and speak with them and be able to tell them that this is what we said, this is what you expect, but this is the modus operandi that is going to take for us to get there. Because the reason Kenyans are getting aggrieved today is because they are not understanding the how. They're asking themselves, what is the how? We are not getting the formula of how we are going to get there. How are we going to get to 100 shillings? This subsidy that we have removed of fuel, and we are believing that in the long run it's going to be helpful. The normal Kenyan is asking how, because if I'm going to buy fuel at almost 300 shillings, I need to understand how is this going to be beneficial in the long run. Because if I don't understand how it's going to be beneficial in the long run, then I must be able to complain today. And that essentially more or less falls in the office of the government spokesperson, because they must be able to make sure that the common Kenyan is understanding what government is doing.
On the question of the Kenya shilling, of course, we keep bringing up the fact that he told us in 3 months, itarudi hapo 120 around penye ilikuwa wakiassume. And so he says the government, so you're talking of how, but he keeps saying one of the interventions we made is this government to government deal, and he has been insistent that it is working, give it time, bei ya mafuta itashuka. Is that not answering the how?
Not really, because there is the how from the boardroom perspective, but then there is the how from the common Mwananchi perspective, because the Mwananchi must understand you. When you say government to government deal and whatever, the common Kenyan might not really understand that language. That's why I'm getting back to the government spokesperson, that the language of the government and how it's operating must be understood by the people. And the government spokesperson must stop reacting. You cannot wait until there is a problem that people are saying the president has traveled too many times, then you come to react. In the instances, in the first place, you are supposed to actually make Kenyans understand each of these trips before you actually wait until it becomes a ticking time bomb, then you now react to
To be fair, the guy just assumed office not too long ago. Let's see whether he will perform better than those who have been holding fort previously. But Suleiman, this was the same question I've asked advice, but this was the weekly review yesterday. Grade E. Wacha ni pandishe juu ndo tuone. There we go. Grade E for the economy. And the reason they tell us that is the Ruto administration is under pressure to rescue. Did I zoom too far? There we go. Is under pressure to rescue the economy, which is edging closer to a black hole due to unpopular tax policies. A majority of Kenyans living in the hand-to-mouth informal sector pay higher personal income tax than corporate bodies. About 60% of SMEs are in default, while 42% of foreign investors have fled the NSE. The nation is in dire straits. This is how the Star put it this morning in their editorial cartoon, and I must say I quite enjoy the editorial cartoons. They're like, we have a plan, and ndio bei mafuta ina skyrocket inapanda juu kama hot air balloon. Do you think part of Kenya Kwanza's problem is that they sold us smoke and mirrors?
Let me start firstly, Olive, before I comment on that, by making reference to page 5 of the Daily Nation, over what we were discussing in terms of the increased charges of these particular levies and fees and what have you.
So, it seems here
yes, but I just wanted to draw to the attention of the team here that in fact the state is calling for views.
Yes.
So this is an important stage in terms of those.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you for that. Let me just pull it up. As Kenyans, you must know so that you can participate. That page 5. Cindy?
Yes. Just down there.
Here we go. There we go. All right. So, invitation to public participation on proposed charges, fees, and levies. So, how can you participate? Views and proposals can be submitted in writing through memoranda clearly marked public participation on new charges and dropped off at the following locations: Nyayo House, ground floor, Nairobi, regional commissioners, county commissioners or deputy county commissioners offices across the country, or email to info, is that .citizen?
Yeah.
.citizenservices@interior.go.ke. I proceed.
So I think the government on this particular note has done its part in terms of inviting the public for for views, and it's important for us. But now let me switch to the other side. In terms of the scorecard of the current regime, I think it's in order to give the current government an E, but we will not despair. We believe that the state has some time to improve on the economy, to have an effect or an impact on the dwindling shilling against the dollar note, the aspect of liquidity in the country in terms of lack of actual finances to finance key projects and what have you. The only issue in terms of how the government ought to run things, the government may enter into a government-to-government oil deal and whatever. But the issue becomes, whenever this issue is focused on by the media, is when we are told that there's a framework or there's an agreement that has been shared with Parliament. Ideally, this is a public document that should be available for public scrutiny. We have had problems with the previous regime. You remember even Kenyans had to petition the High Court to get copies of the SGR contract. Here, when we talk about a government-to-government oil deal between the Asian states, Asian countries and Kenya, I think it's important for us to be fed with that particular information in time. It is unfair for the government to now come out and tell us, we never hid anything, the report is available, the agreement is available before the House or it's available in Parliament. And so always, openness, transparency, and accountability is what Article 10 of the Constitution talks about. Openness in the sense that the government ought to be open with the people. Anything that is people-centered ought to be given to the people, I think, in a timely and efficient manner. If I want to see what this particular contract is about, I have the right to be fed with this information in time, as and when I ask for it. Okay.
But other than being called MPs, legislators, they're also called the people's representatives.
Yes.
So if the document is in Parliament, then don't the people, by virtue of their representatives, have access?
Olive, let me even tell you this, that our houses of Parliament, if I can tell you, a good number of the MPs maybe discovered that there is such a document when the President talked about it. I'll not be surprised. I one time used to do things for them. There's a way you draft questions for them, draw motions, questions to CSS. You will only find a certain number of them who are always active, who always come into certain offices asking for certain legal documents. There are those who do not even know where these particular corners or offices are located, to be honest and to be fair to them. Which is why I said initially that that particular house is very powerful. In whatever issues we are raising, from taxes to these charges, to everything that is affecting the people, that is the house that can sort out our problem. They can amend the Finance Act. They can call on the CS for Interior and ask him this question. They can summon the PS for Immigration Services. They have a raft of power. But the only issue is they are yet to understand that. And secondly, the question of party ideology has gotten into them in the wrong manner. You can be a member of UDA, but at the same time, you can undertake your task in terms of playing the oversight role over the government of the day.
All right.
Yes.
You just put a pin in that, Kidi Mwaga. So there is no denying that, of course, factors of the past play a role in where we are today. So you've talked about export and wachanifungulia watu yako. Ilikuwa page gani?
Page 12 of the Standard.
Ilikuwa page 12?
Yes.
Page 12.
He will tell you all the ways of improving our economies on page 12 today.
Wachakidi ajiuze. Am I close? This 10, 11.
Maybe this should be forwarded to State House.
So, for example, when we're discussing export, and here it is, your column, let us shed our dependence on imports, reinvest production. And so you are responding to Suleiman when he said that we need innovative ways to generate revenue, and he talked about exports, and then you're like, but what is there to export now, right? So this is where the effort is going. So obviously the decision of the past impact where we are today. When you look, David D consistently says debt. That is the thing that is choking us. Yes. Not foreign trips. So these are decisions that were made by the previous administration.
Yes.
But then you have Murkomen at the airport, and I'll pull that poster up in a moment, blaming leaky roofs on the Jubilee neglect of the last 10 years, of which they were a part.
Yes.
So how would you advise them to navigate that? Yes, there are issues, and then Kindiki here stated in that statement that, let me just find it, that, where is that? He say something about the previous administration. Yes, here. Geez, guys, was I reading my own things? But it was something about basically they will not shy away from.
That was Umaura.
It was
The Star.
Oh, it was the Star. Okay, right. They will not shy away from placing at the what's the word? But you get my meaning.
The acts of omission and commissions.
Yes,
that they will not shy away from.
yes.
Yes, Olive. You see, my position and thinking is that to get the country out of the debt, I mean the hole it is in, is that there are things we must do. And one of those things is that we must bring up the productive capacity of our people. Secondly, in bringing up the productive capacity of our people, we must have things that we can export. In having things that we can export, then we must then leverage on our both competitive and comparative advantage, not only in the region but also in the global market. Because if you look at both AGOA, Africa Free Trade Area, ESC market, you realize that the things we used to call as advantages are non-existent today. If anything, we simply had a honeymoon of, living on people's misfortunes. Tanzania had got the legacy of Ujamaa. Uganda had got the legacy of constant conflicts or coup and counter coups, which denied it a chance to build its own industries. And this takes me back to what my brother Mundalo was saying, that the promises that was given to the hustlers was, out of, what was the choice of syntax?
Out of ordinary.
Out of the ordinary. I think that the promises to the hustlers was not out of the ordinary. If anything, the president appreciates very much than anybody else the need to avail the promise of upward social mobility. But then the other thing is that the promise of upward social mobility is giving everyone a chance. But then looking at the fiscal situation, very little fiscal headroom, compounded by an opposition that was very belligerent, it became extremely difficult to do that which is necessary. So for instance, because of the disruptions that we occasioned during the street protest, the revenues collected by the government naturally dropped significantly. But then because there are commitments to be met in the course of running the government and other things, then this money must ideally come from the people. If it does not come from the people, then it has got to come from our multilateral partners, financial partners. So the position we find ourselves in, I think that we are actually seated at, we have a window of opportunity. And if you look at the article on page 12, we are actually quoting Booker T. Washington. While giving his Atlanta speech, he says that, lower down your buckets. We are in a moment where we need to lower down our buckets and scoop the fresh water that is seeping into this ocean that we think we are stuck in a salty water. And this is how lowering the buckets will work. It will work in the sense that if we are able to have a responsible political environment where both the opposition and those in government are willing to genuinely work together in the interest of the people, then we will say that let us ensure that we do that which we need to do to take advantage of, say, the Northern Frontier District that is deemed to be a very hardship area that constantly has had to grapple with famine. But you know that the animals that are being slaughtered at both KMC, at Dagoretti, Abata, and other places come from that place. So if we are able to make sure that we do not only rely on meat, but ensure that there is value addition both on hides and skin, on the bones, on the horns, then we export all that, the country will begin to earn foreign exchange. When that happens, it would significantly reduce the pressure that the dollar has placed on the shilling.
Okay.
If we are able to do this, and we are able to act responsibly as the people of Kenya, both the political leadership and the citizens, then I think that we would be able to reclaim our position very quickly as a leading economy in East Africa. Thank you.
Okay. So kwingine kidogo Kidi, you answered ulinipeleka kwingine kidogo, but I'll come back around to the question of Advice Mundalo. I'll ask you to comment on this one. Yes, debt is an issue. Nobody is denying that. What was the other? What was the other thing I said that the previous administration could be landed at the doorstep of the previous administration?
Mismanagement of the public spending.
So there are issues that legitimately you can call the previous administration to task for. But then you have statements such as this. Transport CS Kipchumba Murkomen attributes the leaking roofs at JKIA to, quote, neglect by previous government. Where is the line? When do they begin to take responsibility for their the failures of their own administration?
I think for me that is just more or less a careless statement from the CS, or maybe sometimes the media puts you on the spot when you have nothing really to respond to them, and maybe that's how you end up with something like blaming previous administration for leaked roofs. Though I was also in a function together with the CS last week in the Engineers Summit, and he also was able to blame bad engineering on the same thing. So for me, it is more or less a question of just not having the correct answer for the correct for the correct question, because you cannot be able to belabor such kind of blames. And that's why I keep saying that there is something in the minds of many people in this administration that every time you don't have an answer, you quickly run to blaming the Jubilee administration. Most of them even forgetting that when you blame the Jubilee administration, you more or less do nothing much because you are part and parcel of that administration. So it's a time that we have to stop giving political answers to Kenyans, because most of these are actually political answers. They are just answers to be able to help us pass time and have someone to blame. We are supposed to get to a point where now we are supposed to be fixing the problem. Because now you have a government, now you are a cabinet secretary, you are a principal secretary, you must be able to be providing solutions to Kenyans and not pointing to the direction of the problem. Because the reason why you are in the office is to provide the solution and not show us where the problem is. Most of the problems, by the way, Kenyans are even aware of where of who caused the problem, who borrowed what. That one, everyone is aware. The reason you are voted in and you are now a government is because the normal Kenyan believed that you can take them on the right trajectory. But now there is this thing that is becoming too much in government. When it started, it was 1 or 2 people. Now we are starting to see CSs blaming the previous administration. Soon we'll be able to see CEOs blaming them. So it's a question of everybody just wants to blame somebody and nobody wants to do the real thing at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we need to have people serving Kenyans. You are in the office to provide leadership and to provide service to Kenyans. And sometimes it is not wrong to accept that we were wrong on this. It is not wrong to accept, for instance, the issue of a leakage at JKI. It's an infrastructural engineering issue. It is not out of the world for you to accept and say we were not aware of this, but now we are going to fix it. You must not always have somebody to blame. Sometimes you can blame yourself. Then just tell Kenyans, these who are not aware of it, but now that it's now here, we are going to work it out without pointing the finger to any direction.
All right. Yes, Suleiman?
Let me say this, Oliver. You know, now it's 14 months after since we have had, I think, an election. I'll even tell you, 10 years to come, Jubilee's regime will remain blamed. You know why? I'll tell you that was the worst regime in the history of our country. It's because I think the troubles that the people of Kenya have faced, how our economy suffered during those 10 years,
yes,
it will take us a while to recover from that particular hole or dip that was chimbered by the former president. Now, you know, when he comes out and tells us or addresses this regime that do not blame me, do your own things. Actually, he should be shameful to come out to address the people or even this current regime. You know why? If this government figures out or looks back at where things have gone wrong, there are so many people within former President Uhuru's circle who should be prosecuted over graft. You know, during Uhuru's regime, I think for those particular 10 years, the government was looted to the last coin. I think you will think that the president and his team wanted to leave Kenya, by the way. Everything was finished. That is why we will occasionally see those who are blaming the previous regime. It was actually the worst in the history of our country. But I'll tell you this. Should the current regime be continuously blaming the previous one? That is the big question. The issue or the question is not about Jubilee's mess. That one, even the kid who was born yesterday knows about it. I think when you are running a country, you know, they say it's a going concern. It's an issue that will be continuous in nature. Someone else becomes a driver and is supposed to steer us out of the murky waters. To be honest, our president, when he was assuming office, he knew about the particular troubles that were caused by Jubilee. He should not remind us about Jubilee's horrible memories. Rather, he should take us out of those particular dirty waters. He should think of how to improve our lives, not to remind us about the failures and the problems that we have faced during the Jubilee's regime. We are at a point whereby we should not even talk about it. We should ask ourselves, or the government should ask itself, what can we do, or how things can be done different this time round. We know that that was a mess. So I think going forward, they have the time, 3 years plus, I think almost 4 years remaining. This is the time for them to now ask themselves, how can we do things different in a way that the people of our country will remember us, I think, going forward. That is more essential for me.
Okay.
Yes.
Kitty?
I think President Kenyatta should really maintain his peace. Maintain his peace, because you must also remember that President Kenyatta is someone who never won a battle on his own unless he was helped. Because remember, this is someone who lost his Gatundu seat in 97. He could only capture Gatundu seat when he was helped by President Moi as KANU presidential candidate. Subsequently, President Kenyatta was talking about having principles, that he had decided to be in Azimio, and I think that was, if there is anyone who holds a record on flip-flopping, it is President Kenyatta.
Really?
Of course.
What do you base that on?
In 2004, President Kenyatta led the PSC to London to talk to John Githongo then as the whistleblower around the Anglo-leasing. I think, no, it was 2006. When he came back at the airport, President Kenyatta shouted, "Can't pay, won't pay." As the president, he gladly paid the Anglo-leasing debts. President Kenyatta is the person who told us that he was going to support Mudavadi. He made a turnaround and made a very
Dark forces.
that I do not want to repeat on the honor by repeating them on this show.
Madimoni.
Remember, President Kenyatta used to call former Prime Minister Muguruki. Then he turned around and asked the people of Kenya to vote for the man he used to call Muguruki. So President Kenyatta, as an elder statesman, we want him to be respected as the elder statesman that he is. But when he is beginning to dabble in politics, it will become very difficult to accord him the respect that he deserves as a former head of state. Because, of course, nobody governs guiltlessly. Everyone who has had to sit in the steering seat to govern a country will, of course, make certain mistakes, some out of, innocent mistake, some in the course of, being part and parcel of the nature of, in the course of doing his work. But I think that President Kenyatta needs to be reminded that where we are today as a country, the country must make very difficult decisions. To make those very difficult decisions and steer the country out of, the ditch, economic ditch that we are in, that the president needs not only the economic headroom, but also the political headroom. Remember, when the opposition was trying to relitigate the question of the grievances of a lost election on the streets, President Kenyatta did not cushion his coalition to handle this matter more responsibly. More responsibly is that national dialogue could have happened without going to the streets. So that if he was a proper leader, that I want to believe he is, he should have advised his people. But remember, even around that time, when the political, the coalition that he belongs to was threatening to storm State House, President Kenyatta kept quiet. So I think that in terms of demonstrating leadership, we would be better off if President Kenyatta just keeps quiet, that if he demonstrates leadership by ensuring that the country, both sides of the political divide work together in the interests of the people, so that we do not have him making the outrageous claims like the one he was making yesterday. And I saw him saying that Azimia are going to form government in 2027. If he could not deliver it as president, I think he is dreaming very much. Thank you.
So I'll invite you to make your closing remarks on this subject. Advice, Mundalo, in a minute each if you're able.
Yeah, I think the only good thing Bashir knows about President Kenyatta is that he traveled less, which was a good example that he used before he started speaking from both ends of his mouth. I'll want to restrict my comments on the former president to a large scale, because I really believe that we need to respect our former heads of state, because I don't want to go the Kidi Mwaga direction where he is blaming the president who was the former chair of Azimio, which both myself and Kidi served in. If Kidi had all this opinion of President Kenyatta, he was not supposed to serve under him in the Azimio coalition per se. And also I find it speaking from both ends when my brother Kidi says he's blaming the president for keeping quiet and also blaming him for not speaking. So I then wonder, what exactly is the former president supposed to do? But be that as it may, I tend to believe that the former president needs to be accorded his respect as a former head of state. I do not believe that he is the worst president that Kenya ever had. Of course, everyone who is in office, there will always be pitfalls here and there. But I also believe that the current administration should be able to take the country forward and move it to a better direction than where it already is. Most of the blame games are not going to help anybody. The blame games of saying who did what is not helpful. At the end of the day, as Kenyans, what we want is solutions. We want the cost of living to go down. We want people to be able to afford food. We want youth employment that was credited to this Kenya Kwanza administration. They talked a lot about it. We want that achieved. Those are the things that we want achieved. We don't want to be told what is the reason why they are not being achieved. Because that to me is the biggest pitfall that we are having. That for every problem, we are being directed to where it originated. For all those places that the problem originated, we are aware. What we need is the solutions. And what we also need is the people must be also responsive enough to know that we will not make government work by being too pessimistic. Because we are also having an image where we want to paint doomsday every day. We want to make it look like government is doing nothing in totality. I don't think that kind of perception will help us. Okay. We need to be able to identify the problems that we think are happening in government and be able to propose what we think are the solutions instead of throwing the baby together with the bathwater.
Thank you. Suleiman,
your
last word?
Okay. I think I'll say that just to figure out where the problem lies, it's crystal clear that the problem is corruption and lack of good governance. If those two issues are actually looked at holistically by the ruling regime, things will be better in future. For me, my parting shot will be, we are going through the flash floods period. I look forward to the government of the day, at least also to, it's already responsive. I've seen what is happening in Garissa. People are being saved, yes. We look forward to the government doubling its efforts, not only the national, but also the county government, so that these are times that we save the lives of our people.
I think my brother talks a great deal on respect, but we must remind him that he is the one person who combined efforts with the people who are trying to oust President Kenyatta as the leader of Jubilee. If he believed in Uhuru so much, he would not have teamed up with people who wanted to oust President Kenyatta as the leader of Jubilee. What I am saying is the truth. What I am saying is the truth is that President Kenyatta mismanaged our public finance, and part of the problem we are in is because of that mismanagement. Secondly, on the areas I've said President Kenyatta flip-flopped, the assessment of facts that are verifiable. Lastly, I think that I have to send out my condolences to the Carter family and everyone across the globe who got inspiration from the wonderful work that Rosalind Carter did with her husband, Jimmy Carter. We extend our sympathies and condolences. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, I will have to... 10 seconds.
Yeah, because I have to reply, because when you say I have edged out President Uhuru Kenyatta, that is extremely wrong. Because President Uhuru Kenyatta served as president and as by law, after serving as president, okay, you cannot hold office as party leader of a political party 6 months after office.
All right.
So we have not, and nobody in Jubilee Party has been able to oust a president former president on anything.
Okay.
So that should be able to be clarified.
Thank you, gentlemen. I am being threatened. Suleiman Bashir, advocate as well as governance analyst. There's a policewoman here who has come to stand for me. Kidi Mwaga, hi Mabel. Mabel Acheng is my producer. Kidi Mwaga, who is a convener at Interparties Youth Forum and a lawyer. And we have Advice Mundalo, who is the Jubilee Party Youth Chair. Mnikome do Uhuru Kenyatta amesema. See you on your world on the other side of this break. And guess what? We're looking at questions to do with the film industry. There is a movie being launched, opening. It's called Kiza. We sit down with members of the cast shortly.